Alright guys, what's going on everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium's TV review of the Apple TV Plus original series, Severance Season 2. This will follow Episode 7, which is called Chikhai Bardo. Okay, wow. I've watched this episode like 4 times now, or at least enough times to kind of write notes on it, which is something I take notes, but I don't do a lot of notes. This is quite a masterful episode. This might be the best episode of the series so far. It's an episode that is highly emotional, gives us a lot of back history to, of course, Gemma and Mark and how they met, and kind of the beginnings of Mark and Lumon and Severance. It is an episode that deals with a lot of stuff, and is an episode that is trying to keep the mystery alive while doing something that a lot of series will do, which is make this a season finale. And wow, this is, I'll just get out of the way. This is like a 10 out of 10. This episode is masterful. It's amazingly done. Jessica Gagné and Dan Erickson and Matt Freeman have done something incredible here. And it introduces us to a new person who's played by Robbie Benson, who is known as a director, but also the voice of the Beast. He plays Dr. Maurer, and he is the one you saw in that other episode where he was walking looking for dental tools. And this is like a continuation of that segment. We now know the export hall is a place that's being kept, where Gemma is being kept. Why she's being kept there is not entirely sure, but it has to do something with a miscarriage. It has to do something with what did Lumon do? What did she do when she signed the paperwork for new patient intake and they used the experimental drugs or experimental ways to get themselves pregnant? It's dealing with a lot, and apparently the exports hall is a way for experiments to happen. What those experiments are, not really entirely sure, but it has to do with Cold Harbor. It's feeling more and more like they are trying to test the human ability to comprehend pain, to comprehend life, to comprehend what would happen between life and death. I'm going to read this word for word from a place called Samye Institute. What Chikhai Bardo references this to is the Bardo of the moment of death. According to tradition, this Bardo begins with the outer and inner signs, outer and inny, of the onset of death, and appears and continues throughout the dissolution of a transmutation until the external and internal breath ends. It makes me question, it makes me wonder, did Gemma die? Did Lumon kill her and they brought her back? And is it a reincarnation thing? Because this is a Buddhist ideology, and Buddhism has to do with, the ideas of existentialness, the idea of like how we move ourselves into the inside, into the world. And, you could look into like reincarnation and stuff like that. There is a lot going in here that Cold Harbor could be a way for an individual to come back to life. There has been rumors and ideologies and ideas and theories that Severance and Lumon are trying to bring Kier back, trying to reincarnate him. Like I said, there's a lot of Tibetan and Buddhist iconography and iconology in this series, as you see through the entire series as it plays out. But once again, Cold Harbor is the last name of the last episode. I have not watched the next 3 episodes because they have not given them to me yet. But there is a lot here that is signifying that Gemma is part of this test. And when Drummond says you're not going to have her for very much longer, that can insinuate that she is going to die, that Mark is helping keep her alive. As we see they're watching, we have people down in the, whatever, I don't know if it's the bowels or another room or what exactly is going on, but there's 4 people that look exactly similar to our 4 main characters. Could have been the ones that we saw in Woe's Hollow as like their twinnies and stuff like that, they're twins. So it's very possible that these individuals who are watching them on the computer could be the ones that we saw in Woe's Hollow. So there is a lot of mystery there that has not been fully explained. But it really is starting to sound like this series, what Lumon is doing, what the Severed Floor is doing, is reincarnation, is bringing back, is the doing the cloning stuff with the, we saw the goats, and we've seen a lot of stuff angling towards that. Now, whether that means that's true or not, it's Severance. Like, I did not expect this type of episode as a seventh episode of a season like Woe's Hollow. This is a completely different type of episode that really just goes in a completely different direction. It feels very much like an homage to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is how it kind of incorporates Mark and Gemma's story from the very beginning when they met, when they were giving blood work, or when they were giving blood, as they do in a lot of places, to the point where they just start to develop a relationship. I love the idea of like how they use like visual effects and CGI, and they like mess with the camera, and they kind of make things like appear, like you see all those books appear and reappear and disappear. It do certain things. I love that music that plays through that segment. I like the fact that it is so disorienting. It is so weird. It is so, like what Robbie says, he's going on a journey, so he is trying to kind of reconfigure himself, reintegrate himself, as we know, to basically be whole again. That's kind of like the idea of like the mind and the mental state and the traditions of like our inner self and our outer self trying to recohesively whole back into one another, and that's a really fascinating thing. But I like how we finally got I'm gonna mispronounce this, I apologize, Dichen Lachman, who really gets to work in a Emmy level type style scenario here, where the things that are happening to her. Sandra Bernhard's in this episode. She's fantastic as a nurse, but she is like the Gemma character, who he kind of realizes being tested, and she is being routine, and she's being put onto this circle of like nonsensical things, but she's being put into these like predicaments, whether it be like an airplane scenario, whether it be she has to write all these thank you cards, and whether she has to go to the dentist, and she has to go all these things. We see very few places, but I like how they're all named after like important towns, and one in Wellington and like New Zealand, and St. Pierre and like Cairns, and Allentown, which of course is I think a Bruce Springsteen song, is also in Pennsylvania. When I first watched this episode, I was wondering, do they have a way of dimensionally going to these different places? But if you think about it and you kind of sit down and kind of logically put yourself in this place, Lumon is a very big company. They're a very big corporation. They have the ability to, it's almost like a holodeck situation, like the plane, like the dentist's office, the ideas of like trying to reintegrate Gemma, or trying to get into her nuts and bolts, trying to like bring her back into society, because maybe they found her dead, and maybe she agreed to it, as we see when they go to the doctor's office and she's at Lumon. We see, of course, the Dr. Maurer in the background, which is very interesting. There is a lot of level of like they're doing all these tests on her, but why are they testing her? What exactly are they testing her for? Once again, it comes back into the idea of like reincarnation, and it comes back in the idea of bringing someone back to life from the dead, and it really is like keeping them, like testing them in the nature of like how they respond to family life, and how they respond to like crazy scenarios, the four tempers and stuff like that. It really is an interesting thing, because this company of Lumon comes off as very sinister and very kind of chaotic, and watching Drummond and watching everybody watch the people up in metadata confinement, and how close they are to doing that, and how long they've been watching Mark, and a lot of those things, like it feels like they are testing two sides of an individual, like two sides of a couple. And that's what she signed up for, because she has those cards that we saw, of course, in OTR. And they talk about Chikhai Bardo and stuff like that, oneself. It's just, you start to think about it, and you start to wonder, like, what exactly, are they just testing the motor skills of Gemma to see how she reacts to everything? And once again, I like the fact that you go down into this bowels of wherever they are, into or actually this floor that Gemma's on could be above Severance. I mean, it's just not entirely sure, but it's interesting watching Dichen Lachman just deal with like what she's being put on her plate as an actress, because she wants to be with Mark, but they're like, you'll eventually be with Mark, and then we just have a few more things we have to do. We have to get to Cold Harbor, and all those mysteries that are being thrown out there, and they're not being fully explained, which is perfectly all right. And I really appreciate that, and I thought that was really fascinating. in most scenarios in life, with the idea that she's having blood drawn and she's having, I started wondering if Miss Huang was Mark and Gemma's kid, but she is too old. And like, what is that nature of like, they claim that she's been there for a while, but we kind of know they're lying because Dr. Maurer says, that Mark had a kid and he's now married. And, I wonder if they're also playing with time. Like, is this in the future? Is this, has Mark really had a kid with, of course, Helly? It's just the nature of what exactly is happening. The funny part about when you watch what Gemma is doing and what the world underneath is doing is it almost feels like the future, like a bomb went off. It feels like a safe house or something like that. But it's just the nature of how Lumon lies and how they are defeatist and stuff like that. But it's a really interesting thing. And like, watching how, Lumon and how they react and how, this doctor feels very skeevy with how he treats Gemma, how he almost feels like he's attracted to her. And, he asks her to like tell her that she loves him. And then, she knocks him over the head and hurts him. I think Robbie Benson, for his like one episode that he's been in, really is fantastic in this episode because he comes off as very mean spirited, but also like he's like trying to keep her in check by lying to her. I like the fact he wears like a very ugly sweater that he's using for, of course, Allentown. I love the idea like that the nurse character, the Sandra Bernhard character, asked whether she would, Gemma would be more afraid of drowning or mudslide. She says drowning. Of course, she was killed in a lake and stuff like that, so that affects her. It's a really interesting thing to watch. It really is. I love the fact that it attempts to signify how two people can find themselves in such a weird, chaotic situation, whether it be at a blood drive, and how that springs off into oneself, and how it creates a very interesting dynamic between two individuals. And we watch them kind of fall apart, and we watch the different kind of big moments, whether they're at the dinner with Devin and Rickon, and we find out that Gemma's pregnant, and then we find out she has a miscarriage, how that truly affects everyone, how that Mark becomes more despondent because she becomes more despondent because of losing someone, and how he becomes more angry and more into himself. It really is kind of like the nature of like how a relationship can, crumble, but also be powerful and emotional. And that's what this episode does, is it takes all the emotionality of what it's like to be a couple and pulls it at its like most chaotic and sad. So the more and more this strenuous relationship happens, the more and more that it causes an individual like Mark to completely snap and to go into Severance, which is what I think Lumon is attempting. They want to Gemma as experiment, so maybe she signed the letter when she filled out the paperwork, and when she's brought back, she has to go under experimentation, but she wants to see Mark, but maybe she's not able to see him. There's a lot of like, what is happening? To be fairly honest, we're gonna find out, I'm sure, this season. But it's like, is Gemma even alive? Is Cold Harbor like we find out is like a server farm where somewhere to like San Junipero? I don't know. It's really interesting. Like when Gemma goes up the elevator to become Miss Casey again, and Milchek opens the door with like a really cool shot. There's a lot of cool shots and a lot of cool camera movements and work in here. When Gemma's walking down the hallway and the lights light up. But when she goes up the elevator and she sees Milchek, and Milchek's like, "Oh no, your Audi was part of coming here for a part of an art thing or whatever, art gallery or whatever," and she got in the wrong elevator. But she never questions it. She just goes back down the elevator. It goes off, and it was like, Mark, I want you, blah 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 blah. But that's that is the fascination between what is happening here with Gemma, what is happening to Mark, who's journeying through his kind of history with Gemma. Is like the whole reason of reintegration is he wants to find Gemma again. So he's going through like an Eternal Sunshine, like I said, of the Spotless Mind situation, where he's reliving like his whole kind of life with, of course, Gemma, and it leads to like some really sad moments where he is at his desk. He's very despondent when she's going to say she's going to go for charades. A lot of that stuff hasn't been revealed about like, was she killed? Did she crash? Did Lumon bring her back? Well, I'm sure we'll get explanations for that. We see kind of like the sadness of like him getting talked to by the police, who could be run by Lumon, of course. It could not actually be the police. It could be Lumon's like version of the police. And basically what ends up happening is we kind of learn how he gets to where Mark gets to where he's at, which is, like I said, really devastating. I've had tears in my eyes after seeing that moment with her, Gemma, crying out for Mark. That moment, that shot where it's like the two of them staring at each other, even though it's like different moments. Mark with the police, and Gemma on the elevator, and the nature of like how far apart people can be, but how they feel like connected to one another. And once again, that is very traditional Tibetan Buddhism and stuff like that. But you also got like Robbie and Devin, who are going back and forth with one another, arguing. Devin says you are not going to do anything else to him, but Robbie's trying to tell her, you guys are acting alike. I'm going to do what I need to do. And then Devin threatens the call of Cobell, which is a very terrible idea. As we've learned, Robbie's like, I'm out, peace. Walks out the door, says you can deal with this on your own, which will eventually leads to who knows if she comes back. I don't know. Devin may go after Robbie to be like, look, I changed my mind. But it leads to Mark waking up after his journey. And the look on Adam Scott's face and the look of his sadness is heartbreaking. The tears in his eyes, Emmy nominated performance once again. I think it's a moment where you just have to sit back and think about it. I actually have told people after watching this episode, I said, finish up 1 through 6, watch this episode, and sit there and ponder what is happening, because there is a lot of stuff happening in this episode that deals with, the mysteries of Lumon, the ideas of dark and disturbing, the nature of like the fact that there's 4 people watching each individual person in macadamia refinement, how they look very similar to the 4 main characters. What does that mean? What is, there's 65%, Cold Harbor, the idea like how, this Dr. Maurer and Drummond, what exactly are they anticipating? What exactly is going to happen? Once again, we're given enough information, but we're not given all the information, which is what should be happening. It is very emotional, very prescient, very sad, and very just kind of chaotic in the simple fact of how relationships work, how they can be manipulated. It really is kind of what exactly is creating this. What exactly is Gemma involved with? Did she sign her life away when they offered the chance for her to have kids? Because if you look at the note, it talks about stuff like that, about trying to have a baby. Maybe Gemma's not able to have a kid, and this is a way for people to have kids. They go to fertilization doctors all the time to find out if they're able to possibly find a way to have kids, if there's a drug, whatever. That's what kind of that story is. But did she sign something she didn't realize? Is she like lying to Mark? It's a lot of stuff. Once again, I believe the doctor's office stuff, and then the miscarriage is kind of is reversed. So the miscarriage happens after the doctor's office. So whatever happened to her is a cause of the Lumon drugs that he's giving her. And to watch kind of the disillusion of this like relationship and how it affects Mark, even though there is, the watching him with like the idea of like him going after Helly and having sex with Helly. Maybe the idea of Mark and Gemma, it just isn't what we are led to believe what it is. I don't know, but there's a lot of stuff, people. There's a lot of stuff in this episode. It's packed full of just crazy stuff. It has a lot of emotional heart, and just thinking about it, it gets at that part of your soul. It gets at that part of your brain and your well-being that it truly shows the emotional impact of a really great show. And it would take a lot. I mean, it could possibly happen, but it would take a lot of crumbling for this series to just completely fall by the wayside. I won't say it won't happen. I mean, the next episode could be terrible. I mean, I don't know, but not from what I've seen. At 7 episodes in, and this season is insane, and it's beautiful, and it's dealing with such emotional level of impact, and it gives you goosebumps when you watch it. And this episode there's so much there. There's so much impactful stuff. I think Dan Erickson has become like Vince Gilligan, one of the great writers, by just creating powerful human emotions and powerful resonance, and really getting to the crux of what human emotionality is. and using the beliefs of like Buddhism and Tibetan, initialism, stuff like that, and how American companies like are so weird and mysterious. You look at the Amazons, you look at the Apples, you look at all these major conglomerates and stuff like that, and there is a lot of this there. I think Dan Erickson, I think Ben Stiller, I think all the writers, directors should be commended for this episode because it is fascinating. It's well put together. It's beautiful. It's heartbreaking. It's emotionally resonant, and it's the best episode of the series. Like I said, it's going to take a lot, and I don't doubt the next 3 episodes won't do something that will amaze me and astound me, and I can't wait to see where this season goes, but I don't know where it's going to go. I'm giving this a straight 10 out of 10. Highest grade I could give it. A+ all the way. It's fantastic. It's worth your watch. And if you are a fan of Severance, this is going to raise the bar of like how this series can be what it is. So I'm curious after this episode how they're even going to do a season 3 after the 7th episode. Like, what are they going to do with season 3? Who knows at this point? But I have a full faith in Erickson and Stiller and the crew and the cast, and we'll see for next week's episode for episode 8. So there you go. But with that said, that is my take of Severance season 2, episode 7. Chikhai Bardo. Yeah, there's a lot more. I probably will be told in the comments what I missed. I know it's just a lot of stuff. Very interesting. I hope I did justice for this episode. That's what I hope for. So in the comments below, how did this episode treat you? How did it, did it feel manipulative? Did it not? What is your overall take? What do you think is happening? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Just let me know in the comments below. I'm really, really interested in knowing. So there you go. Anyways, with that said, thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out, guys.